The city streets were filled with noise of traffic and people rushing in every direction. Among all that movement, there was a woman named Clara. She was not rich, she was not famous, but she carried a heart larger than many could ever imagine. Clara had lived a difficult life since her younger years. She worked long hours in a small laundry shop and came home tired every evening. Life was not kind to her, yet she always believed that kindness should never leave a person no matter how much they suffer. Clara had no family of her own. She had once dreamed of having children, a warm house, and laughter at the dinner table, but those dreams never came true. Still, she carried inside her a deep love that waited for someone to receive it. One rainy evening, Clara was walking home from work. The sky was dark and heavy, the streets wet with puddles, and the cold wind cut through her thin coat. As she turned into a narrow alley to shorten her walk, she saw something that made her stop. Huddled under a broken wooden board were 4 children. They were wet, shivering, and holding each other tightly to keep warm. Clara's heart sank. The oldest looked no more than 12, while the youngest was barely 4. Their faces were thin, their clothes torn, and their eyes filled with both fear and sadness. Clara stood still for a moment. Many people would pass such a scene and tell themselves they could do nothing, but Clara could not walk away. She knelt beside them and spoke softly. "Children, what are you doing here? Where are your parents?" The oldest boy looked at her carefully, as if he had seen too many strangers to trust easily. His voice was low and rough. "We don't have anyone. We have been on the street for a long time." Clara felt a wave of pain in her chest. She could see in their faces that they were not lying. These children had been left to fight the world on their own. She asked them their names, and slowly they shared them. The oldest was David, 12 years old, trying to act strong, though his eyes showed how tired he was. Beside him was Ruth, a quiet girl of 10 who kept holding the younger ones close. The third child was Samuel, 7 years old, who looked curious even in his sadness. The youngest was little Anna, only 4, who pressed her face against Ruth's arm and said nothing. Clara sat with them for a long moment, listening to the sound of the rain and the trembling of their small bodies. In her mind, she heard many voices. The voice of caution telling her she had nothing, that she could not care for 4 children. The voice of fear saying this was too big a responsibility, but louder than all of them was the voice of love inside her heart. "Come with me," Clara finally said. "You cannot stay here in the cold. I may not have much, but you will not go hungry, and you will not sleep in the rain again." The children looked at one another. They had been betrayed too many times, promised things that never came true, but something in Clara's eyes felt different. She did not look at them with pity. She looked at them with a kind of strength that told them she meant every word. Slowly, David gave a small nod. He helped Anna stand, took Samuel's hand, and together with Ruth they followed Clara out of the alley. Clara lived in a very small home. It was just 2 rooms, one where she slept and another where she cooked and kept a small table. The walls were old, the roof sometimes leaked, and the floor had more cracks than she could count. Yet when the children entered, they felt a warmth they had not felt in a long time. It was not the house itself, but the welcome that made it feel safe. That night, Clara cooked what little food she had, some bread, a pot of soup made with vegetables, and warm tea. She divided everything into 5 bowls, keeping the smallest for herself. The children ate hungrily, and Clara watched them with tears filling her eyes. She had never seen children so grateful for such a simple meal. After eating, she found old blankets and gave one to each child. The children curled up on the floor, and soon the sound of their soft breathing filled the house. Clara sat on her chair and looked at them for a long time. She knew her life had just changed forever. She was no longer a woman walking through life alone. She had chosen to take in 4 children who had no one else. She did not know how she would feed them tomorrow, how she would clothe them, or how she would pay for their needs. But she knew one thing with certainty. She would never let them feel abandoned again. The days that followed were not easy. Clara worked even harder at the laundry shop, taking in extra hours and saving every small coin. She came home tired, but when she opened the door and saw the children smiling at her, the weight of her work became lighter. David tried to help by doing small jobs in the neighborhood, carrying bags for people or sweeping the shop floors. Ruth took care of Anna, brushing her hair, singing to her, and teaching her little songs. Samuel followed Clara everywhere, asking questions, eager to learn how to cook, how to wash, how to fold clothes. Slowly, the house that had once been silent became full of laughter, noise, and life. At night, Clara would sit with them and tell stories. She spoke of hope, of strength, of never giving up. She told them that even if the world seemed against them, love could create a home where none existed. The children listened closely, their eyes shining. They had lost so much, but Clara's voice made them believe that maybe life still had gifts waiting for them. The neighbors soon noticed the change. Some whispered that Clara was foolish to take on such a burden. She can barely feed herself, they said. Why would she bring 4 hungry mouths into her life? But others admired her courage. They saw how the children slowly grew healthier, how their clothes became cleaner, and how their eyes regained light. Clara did not care about what people said. She had made her choice, and every day it was confirmed in her heart. Watching Anna learn her first letters, seeing Samuel's endless questions, hearing Ruth's gentle singing, and witnessing David's determination to protect his siblings, all of it gave Clara strength she never thought she had. She was no longer just a laundress working for coins. She was a mother in every way that mattered, and though she did not know what the future would hold, Clara believed one truth with all her heart. She had saved these children from the cold street, but in many ways they had saved her too. Morning light streamed through the cracks of Clara's small window. The sound of children laughing filled the house. For Clara, it was music better than any song she had ever heard. Just weeks earlier, her home had been silent, but now it carried life and joy. Each morning followed a rhythm. Clara woke early, prepared whatever food she could manage, and then hurried off to her job at the laundry shop. Before she left, she always reminded David, the oldest, to look after his siblings. David, though only 12, took this responsibility seriously. He swept the floor, kept watch over Ruth, Samuel, and little Anna, and tried to make Clara proud. Life was not easy. Clara's income was small, and 4 children meant more food, more clothes, and more needs. There were days when she returned home with nothing more than a loaf of bread and a few vegetables, yet somehow she made it enough for all of them. The children never complained. They knew what hunger felt like before Clara found them, and to them every meal at her table was a blessing. One evening, Clara noticed that David was unusually quiet. He sat by the window staring outside. She placed her hand gently on his shoulder and asked, "What is troubling you, my boy?" David hesitated, then answered, "I should be the one taking care of them. You already work so hard, and now we are only giving you more struggle." Clara's eyes softened. She knelt beside him so that their eyes met. "Listen to me, David. You are a child even if you try to act older. Your only duty now is to grow, to learn, and to love your brother and sisters. Taking you in was not a burden. It was the greatest gift my heart has ever received." Her words stayed with him. That night, David promised himself that one day he would repay Clara for everything she had done. Ruth, on the other hand, was different. She was quiet and gentle, but she carried a strength that surprised Clara. She often helped with Anna, combing her hair, washing her clothes, and even trying to teach her little letters she drew on pieces of paper. Clara saw in Ruth a girl who, despite her young age, already carried the heart of a mother. Samuel was the curious one. Every question he asked was like a window opening into a bigger world. Why is the sky blue? How does fire burn? Who made the stars? His endless curiosity made Clara laugh, even on the most tiring days. She often sat with him in the evenings, answering what she could and encouraging him to keep asking questions. She believed that curiosity would lead him to greatness someday. And then there was Anna, the youngest. At first she was shy and spoke little. The trauma of the streets had left her scared and withdrawn. But slowly, with Clara's love and Ruth's care, she began to smile again. The first time Clara heard Anna's laughter, it was like sunshine breaking through dark clouds. It reminded Clara why she had chosen this path. Time passed. Months turned into years, and the bond between Clara and the children grew unbreakable. Still, life brought many struggles. Clara's job at the laundry paid very little. Sometimes she worked until her hands were raw and her back ached. But she never let the children see her tears. She wanted them to feel safe, not worried. One winter, food became especially scarce. Prices in the market rose, and Clara's earnings could not cover all their needs. The children noticed her skipping meals, pretending she was not hungry so that they could eat. One night, David whispered to Ruth and Samuel, and together they decided to help. The next morning, David offered to carry goods for shopkeepers, Ruth offered to sweep the steps of the bakery, and Samuel ran errands for neighbors. By the evening, they had earned a handful of coins. When they gave the coins to Clara, her eyes filled with tears. "My sweet children," she said softly, "you should not have to work at your age. But your hearts are the greatest treasure I could ever ask for." She hugged them all tightly, and in that embrace, they felt more warmth than any fire could give. The community slowly began to see the change in the children. Neighbors who once doubted Clara now admired her. They saw how the children grew healthier, how they greeted others with respect, and how they carried themselves with dignity despite their hard life. Some neighbors even began helping, giving old clothes, leftover food, or school books they no longer used. Clara accepted everything with gratitude, and the children cherished every gift. School, however, was another challenge. Clara knew that education was the key to breaking the cycle of poverty. But sending 4 children to school required money for books, uniforms, and fees. Still, she refused to give up. She worked extra hours, saved every coin, and with the help of kind neighbors, she managed to enroll David and Ruth in school. Samuel was still too young, and Anna was just beginning to speak more confidently, but Clara promised them their time would come. The first day David and Ruth wore simple uniforms, Clara could not stop smiling. "Walk proudly," she told them, "because knowledge is the greatest light in this world." School was not easy for them. They were behind in many subjects, and some children laughed at their worn shoes and simple clothes. But David and Ruth remembered Clara's sacrifices. They studied harder than anyone else, determined to make her proud. Every evening they sat at the table, books open, while Samuel listened with curiosity and Anna colored pictures beside them. Their small house became not only a home but also a place of learning. Clara often sat quietly watching them. She knew her life had been filled with hardship, but in those moments she felt rich in ways money could never provide. Yet with every step forward came new trials. There were times when Clara fell ill from overwork. On those days, the children cared for her just as she cared for them. Ruth cooked simple meals, David managed the house, Samuel brought her water, and Anna sang softly at her bedside. Clara realized that they were not just children depending on her. They were a family depending on each other. One evening, as the family sat together after dinner, David spoke up. "Mama Clara," he said, for by then that was what they called her. "One day when we are grown, we will take care of you. You will never have to work again." Clara's eyes filled with tears. She had never asked for anything in return, yet hearing those words touched her soul. "I do not need anything, my children," she replied. "Just seeing you grow into kind, strong people is all I ask for. That will be my reward." The years kept moving, bringing both struggle and hope. The children grew taller, wiser, and stronger. Each step they took was guided by Clara's endless love. She gave them not only shelter but also a sense of belonging, of identity, of worth. Clara often thought about the night she found them in the alley. She wondered what might have happened if she had walked past them, pretending not to see. The thought made her shiver. She was certain of one thing: saving them had also saved her. The little home, though poor and simple, was rich with love. And in that love, the seeds of a future were planted. A future none of them could yet see. A future where the sacrifices of one woman and the gratitude of 4 children would one day shape a story far greater than they could imagine. The years passed quickly in Clara's little home. What had once been a small shelter for a lonely woman had grown into a place full of love and hope. The children were growing fast. David was now a young man with broad shoulders and serious eyes. Ruth had blossomed into a thoughtful and graceful girl who carried kindness in every word she spoke. Samuel, always curious, was turning into a clever and sharp-minded boy, while little Anna, though still young, had grown lively and cheerful, her laughter filling every corner of the house. Clara worked harder than ever. She took on sewing jobs at night after finishing her long hours at the laundry. She wanted to make sure the children had everything they needed for school. Her body grew weaker, but her spirit remained strong. To her, the children were worth every sacrifice. But life has a way of testing even the strongest hearts. One ordinary afternoon, as Clara was returning from work, she noticed smoke rising from the street ahead. A small shop had caught fire and people were rushing around in panic. Clara hurried closer, hoping to help. Inside the shop, she could hear someone calling out. Without thinking of her own safety, she pushed her way through the crowd and stepped into the smoke-filled building. The fire was spreading quickly. Clara found a young woman trapped near the back, struggling to lift a heavy box. Clara pulled her away and guided her toward the door. But just as they reached the exit, the flames grew stronger. The woman stumbled, and in her fear she shouted Clara's name loudly as people pulled them outside. Later, when the fire was put out, some in the crowd whispered that Clara had caused it. She had been seen near the shop before, carrying laundry for a customer, and now rumors began to spread. People said she had set the fire by mistake, perhaps by dropping a hot piece of coal from her ironing stove, or worse, on purpose. Clara was shocked when officials came to her home the next day. They asked her questions, searched her small house, and took away her ironing stove. They told her she would need to come with them. The children clung to her, frightened and confused. "Mama Clara, don't go," Anna cried, tears running down her cheeks. Clara hugged her tightly. "Do not fear, my child," she whispered. "The truth will protect me." But the truth was not enough. The trial was quick and harsh. Clara explained again and again that she had gone inside the shop only to save the woman. She spoke of her work, her long hours, her life of sacrifice. But the shop owner, who had lost much in the fire, insisted she was to blame. Witnesses claimed they had seen her near the shop often, and others repeated the rumors that spread like wildfire through the town. Clara had no money to hire a strong lawyer. The one appointed to her was careless and unprepared. He did little to defend her, and in the eyes of the court, Clara was guilty. The children were not allowed to speak. They wanted to tell everyone what kind of woman Clara truly was, but their voices were ignored. In the end, the judge announced the sentence: life in prison. The words fell like thunder in the courtroom. Clara felt her knees weaken, but she held her head high. She looked toward the children, who sat in the back with tears streaming down their faces. She smiled at them even as her heart broke. "Be strong," she mouthed silently. The guards led her away. The children ran forward, trying to reach her, but they were held back. Anna cried so loudly that even the judge lowered his head. That night, the house that had once been filled with laughter was silent. The children sat together, holding hands. They had lost the woman who had saved them from the streets, the woman who had given them a home, a mother's love, and hope for the future. David felt a heavy weight settle on his shoulders. He was now 16, still young, but he knew he must take care of his siblings as Clara had once taken care of them. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Clara remained in prison, her heart aching for the children she could no longer see. Letters were rarely delivered, but when she managed to write, she filled the pages with words of encouragement. Be kind to one another. Do not lose hope. Remember, love will always protect you. The children wrote back whenever they could. Ruth would fill her letters with details about their small home, how Samuel was learning quickly at school, how Anna was singing more each day. David's letters were fewer, but they carried a strength that told Clara he was working hard to keep the family together. Life for the children was not easy. Without Clara, money became scarce again. David worked every job he could find, carrying goods, cleaning shops, even working late nights at warehouses. Ruth continued to care for Anna while Samuel helped with small tasks to earn coins. The neighbors who once doubted Clara now remembered her kindness and offered help when they could. Some gave food, others gave old clothes. But no matter how difficult things became, the children remembered Clara's words: "Do not give up." Inside the prison walls, Clara struggled with loneliness. The cold stone walls surrounded her and the days felt endless. Yet she carried strength within her heart. She thought of the children every morning, imagining their faces, hearing their laughter in her memory. She prayed for their safety, and she believed that one day, truth would come to light one evening. As Clara sat in the prison yard, another woman asked her, "Why do you still smile when you have lost everything?" Clara answered softly, "Because I have not lost everything. My children are out there. As long as they are alive and growing, I have hope." Those words spread among the women in the prison. Many admired her strength. Clara became someone they looked up to, offering comfort to others who felt broken. Even in her darkest place, she gave light to those around her. Meanwhile, the children grew older. David turned into a man much earlier than most boys his age. He carried the memory of Clara's sacrifices in every step he took. Ruth blossomed into a young woman whose wisdom and calmness reminded everyone of Clara herself. Samuel, clever and eager, dreamed of becoming someone who could fight for justice so that people like Clara would never suffer again. Anna, though still young, carried Clara's spirit in her bright eyes and joyful smile. They never forgot what Clara had done for them. Though life was heavy, they promised each other that one day they would find a way to free her. And so while Clara spent her days behind bars, and the world seemed to have forgotten her, the children she had once saved carried her love like a fire in their hearts, a fire that would, one day, burn through the darkness of injustice and bring her back to them. For now they could only wait, grow, and prepare for the day when truth would finally be heard. Years kept moving like waves in the ocean. What was once a small house with 4 frightened children and 1 kind woman became a place of strong young hearts learning to carry the weight of life. Clara remained in prison, but her love and lessons lived inside the children she had raised. They carried her words like treasures, and every choice they made was guided by her spirit. David was the first to step into the world of adulthood. At 16, he had already been working to support his siblings. By the time he turned 20, he was no longer just a boy who swept floors and carried boxes. He became a respected worker in a warehouse, known for his honesty and strength. People often said, "If you need someone you can trust, call David." He worked long hours, but he never once complained. Every coin he earned reminded him of the sacrifices Clara once made. Ruth grew into a graceful young woman with a quiet confidence. She loved books and learning. When she finished her basic schooling, she began to work as a teacher's helper in a small community school. She taught children how to read and write, and when she looked at their bright faces, she thought of the day Clara had told her, "Knowledge is the greatest light." Ruth carried that light into her classroom every day. Samuel, always curious, was now a teenager full of energy and determination. He had grown clever with numbers and words. He dreamed of studying law one day. He remembered the trial that had taken Clara away, and he could never forget the helplessness he felt as a boy who could not speak for her. One day, he promised himself, "I will speak for her. I will fight with words and truth." Anna was the youngest, but as she grew, she carried a joy that lifted everyone around her. She loved music and drawing, and she often said, "When I sing, I feel Mama Clara near me." Her bright smile gave hope to her siblings on the hardest days. Together, the 4 of them built a life. It was not perfect, but it was strong. They supported one another, and whenever they felt tired, they reminded themselves of the night Clara had taken them out of the cold alley. That memory gave them courage to keep going, but even as they grew, the shadow of Clara's prison sentence followed them. Every birthday, every new achievement, every simple meal together, they felt her absence. David often set an extra plate at the table, even though he knew she would not be coming home that night. It was his silent way of saying she still belonged with them. One evening, as the siblings sat together, Ruth spoke softly. "We cannot just live our lives while Mama Clara suffers. We must do something." David looked at her, his face serious. "What can we do? We are not powerful. We are not rich." Samuel leaned forward, his eyes burning with determination. "We may not be rich or powerful, but we are not children anymore. We are strong. We are educated. And we have the truth. That is more powerful than anything else." Anna nodded, her voice clear and full of hope. "Mama Clara once said that love can create a home. Maybe love can also create freedom." In that moment, they made a silent promise to one another. They would not stop until Clara was free. Their journey was not simple. They began by saving money. David worked longer shifts. Ruth took extra classes in the evenings to learn more about teaching. Samuel spent hours in the library reading about law, justice, and cases of people who had been wrongly accused. Anna practiced speaking in front of small groups, learning how to use her voice to inspire others. Years passed and their skills grew. Samuel earned a scholarship to study law at a local college. It was not easy. He had to balance studies with part-time jobs, but his heart never wavered. He told his professors about Clara, and some of them encouraged him to believe that her case could be reopened one day. Ruth became a full teacher, beloved by her students. She told them stories of courage, of kindness, of holding on to hope even in the darkest times. The children in her class looked up to her not only as a teacher, but also as someone who truly cared about them. David became a leader at his workplace. His honesty and dedication earned him respect from everyone around him. Though he was quiet, people trusted his word. He often used his influence to gather support for causes in the community, always remembering how others had once helped them in their time of need. Anna, Still, the youngest grew into a woman with a gift for speaking and singing. She used her voice to share hope in community gatherings, often singing songs that reminded everyone of the power of love. People admired her brightness and felt inspired whenever she spoke. Though they were busy building their own lives, their main goal never left their minds. Clara. Every month they visited her in prison. The visits were often short, but the moments were precious. Clara, older now and with gray in her hair, still greeted them with the same smile she had given them on the day they entered her home. "My children," she would say, her eyes shining, "you have grown so much. I'm proud of you, more proud than words can ever say." David always tried to hide his tears. Ruth would hold Clara's hands tightly. Samuel would share his progress in law school, promising that one day he would use his knowledge to fight for her. Anna always ended the visit by singing softly, filling the cold prison walls with warmth. One evening after a visit, Samuel spoke with his siblings as they walked home. "I believe we are ready," he said firmly. "We have the strength now. We have knowledge, we have connections, and we have truth. It is time we begin to fight for her freedom." David looked at him, his jaw set. "Then let us begin." From that day forward, their mission became clearer. Samuel started researching Clara's case in detail, reading old records and court papers. He discovered mistakes that had been ignored during the trial. Weak evidence, unreliable witnesses, and a lawyer who had not defended her properly. Ruth gathered support from the community. She spoke to neighbors, parents, and teachers, reminding them of who Clara was, the woman who had once saved 4 children and given them a home. Slowly, more and more people began to listen. David used his workplace connections to reach people who could help, while Anna spoke at gatherings telling Clara's story with such emotion that many were moved to tears. The siblings were no longer just survivors of the streets. They had grown into voices of strength, united by love. And though the road ahead was still uncertain, they believed in their hearts that the day would come when Clara would walk free again. The promise they made to each other in their small home now burned brighter than ever. They would not rest until justice was done, and somewhere in the prison Clara felt the warmth of their determination. Though she did not yet know how or when, she believed with all her heart that her children would keep their promise. Years had passed like chapters in a long book. Clara remained in prison, her hair now touched with silver, her face carrying the marks of time. But her eyes still shone with the same kindness, the same quiet strength that had once welcomed 4 frightened children into her home. Those children were no longer children. They were adults now, strong, educated, and determined. Their love for Clara had only grown deeper with time. Every day, every decision, every step they took was guided by the promise they had made, to fight for her freedom. Samuel, now a young lawyer, had spent countless nights reading through Clara's old trial papers. He had gone line by line, searching for truth in the shadows of injustice. At last he found it. The evidence against Clara had always been weak. The fire had no clear cause, and witnesses had only repeated rumors. Most important, Clara's lawyer at the time had failed her, leaving her defenseless. Samuel knew these were strong grounds to reopen the case. Ruth worked by his side. She gathered letters from the community. People who remembered Clara's kindness. People who had seen how she had saved 4 homeless children and given them a family. They wrote about her character, her honesty, and her sacrifices. One neighbor wrote, "If there is one person who deserves freedom, it is Clara. She gave when she had nothing." David used his respected position at work to speak to leaders in the town. He shared Clara's story with anyone willing to listen. "She is not a criminal," he would say firmly. "She is a mother. She saved lives. She gave hope. And now it is time we give her justice." His voice carried weight, because everyone knew David as a man of truth. Anna used her gift of speaking and singing to touch hearts. She told Clara's story at gatherings, her voice trembling with emotion, her eyes filled with tears. "When I was only 4 years old, I was cold, hungry, and forgotten by the world," she would say. "Clara took me in. She gave me love, warmth, and safety. If not for her, I would not be standing here today. She is my mother. She is our mother. And she deserves to come home." People listened. People believed. Slowly, the town that had once turned against Clara began to turn toward her again. At last, after years of effort, Samuel filed an appeal to reopen Clara's case. The day of the hearing arrived. The siblings dressed carefully, their hearts beating fast. This was the day they had been waiting for. They entered the courtroom together, side by side, stronger than ever. Clara was brought in, her steps slow but steady. When she saw her children, now grown, her eyes filled with tears. She wanted to rush to them, to hold them, but she stayed calm. She sat down, lifting her chin with quiet dignity. Samuel stood before the judge, his voice clear and steady. He spoke not only as a lawyer, but as a son. He explained how the trial years ago had been unfair. He showed the weak evidence, the unreliable witnesses, and the failure of Clara's defense. He spoke of her character, her sacrifices, her love. He told the court the truth the world had ignored for so long. Ruth read aloud the letters from the community. Each letter carried the voice of someone touched by Clara's kindness. "She gave us hope," one letter said. "She deserves freedom," another wrote. David stood and spoke simply but powerfully. "Your Honor," he said, "I was one of the 4 children she saved. If not for her, I would not be alive. She gave us food, shelter, love. She taught us honesty and courage. She is not guilty. She is a mother." Finally, Anna stepped forward. She sang a short song, her voice soft but full of feeling. The words were about love that never fades, about light that never dies, about hope that carries through the darkest night. Her song filled the courtroom, and even those who had come with doubt felt their hearts tremble. When she finished, the room was silent. The judge looked at Clara, then at her children. He studied the papers, the evidence, and the faces of everyone present. For a long moment, no one moved. Then at last, the judge spoke. His voice was steady. Clara's trial was unjust. The evidence was weak, the defense poor, and her character speaks louder than any accusation. After reviewing the facts and hearing the testimonies, this court declares Clara innocent. Her life sentence is ended. She is free. The words rang through the courtroom like bells of hope. Clara gasped, her hand covering her mouth. Tears rolled down her cheeks. David, Ruth, Samuel, and Anna rushed to her, and at last, after 20 long years, they embraced her without fear of being torn apart. The courtroom filled with applause, not because of victory over law, but because of victory of love, truth, and perseverance. Clara stepped outside the prison walls with her children by her side. The sun shone brightly, and she lifted her face to the sky, breathing in the air of freedom. For 2 decades she had been trapped in darkness, but now she stood in the light again. The community welcomed her back with open arms. Neighbors who once doubted her now came to her door with smiles and tears. "We were wrong," they said. "Forgive us." Clara, with her gentle heart, forgave them all. She held no anger, only gratitude for the new chance at life. Her home, though small, was full of warmth once again. She sat at the table looking at her children. No longer small, frightened faces, but grown men and women strong with love and courage. She realized something deep within her heart. Though prison had taken years from her, it had not taken her spirit, nor had it broken the bond of family. One evening, as they all sat together, Clara spoke softly. "My children, when I found you in the rain that night, I thought I was saving you. But the truth is, you saved me. You gave my life meaning, and now, you have given me freedom." David placed his hand over hers. "Mama Clara, we are only repaying the love you gave us." Samuel nodded firmly. "Justice came because of truth, but also because of the family you created." Ruth smiled, her eyes shining with tears. "We will always stand with you as you once stood for us." Anna leaned against Clara and whispered, "We are home." In that moment, Clara felt complete. She had lost many years, but she had gained something greater, proof that love can survive any trial, that kindness can defeat injustice, and that even in the darkest of prisons, hope can keep the heart alive. And so, the story that began with a woman taking in 4 homeless children ended with those same children giving her back her life. It was not just freedom from prison. It was freedom to live again, surrounded by the love she had once given so freely. The night was quiet, the stars above shining brightly. Clara looked at her children and whispered a prayer of gratitude. She knew her life had been hard, but it had also been full of miracles, and the greatest miracle of all was love. A love that had once saved 4 children in the rain, and 20 years later had saved her in return.